How do you make realistic sounding strings in your scores? We're diving deeper into the orchestration elements here, and this is where people think of as Hollywood score for a film or for a video game, and they have this great big idea of a whole orchestra playing. So let's identify how to do that. First of all, let's think of what's going on in real life. If you were to go see a concert of a great big symphony playing, what would that be? Well, you'll have a bunch of people laid out on the stage playing different instruments, arranged in different sections, and you'll have this composer who's come up with these parts for them all to be playing together. So if you're looking at just the string section, if you're looking at the traditional definition of a standard chamber strings band, you'll have first violins, second violins, violas, basses, and cellos. Now, traditionally, that number in a standard chamber strings band is 8 violins, 5 second violins, 4 violas, 2 basses, and 4 cellos. If you were to go to see a standard symphonic strings band, that means you're going to probably have 18 violins, 14 second violins, 10 violas, 8 basses, and 10 cellos. And when you see a huge band like this, that's a really big sound because there's a lot of people playing these instruments. Now, that's not convenient for software because A, that's a lot to write for, and B, your computer probably can't handle that many instruments, or at least not easily unless you've spent a lot of money. So what we've found is some shortcuts here over experimentation, in that the minimum number of instruments to get a full sounding strings band is the following. Usually 4 violins is enough, 3 second violins, 3 violas, 3 basses, and 3 cellos. If you get that number, it sounds pretty full, and most people won't be able to tell the difference that you're using more or using this number. This is a pretty full sounding amount. So you can stick with this as your guideline. So now we know how many instruments to use if you wanted to make a full sounding string band. But how do I make those sound like someone's actually playing them rather than just the software is making a synth sound? Well, this is where articulations are going to come into play. And this is something that the musician who actually does play the instrument will know everything about this. But as someone who might not play the violin or viola or the bass or the cello and so on, you will have to play around with different articulations to get the hang of what sounds realistic and what doesn't. So this is something that's going to require some practice, but the idea is quite straightforward. Whenever a musician is playing an instrument, she can choose to apply a certain amount of pressure to the strings. She's going to press it long or a really short sound. She's going to press it hard to get a lot more sound out. The volume's going to be louder or really softly and quietly. And all of these different sounds and expression that she can apply to it will give different feeling to the music. And this is where we can say one musician is better than another because they were able to apply more articulations in a way that was more impactful to the audience. Now, software's come a long way, and what they've done is they've recorded all the different kinds of articulations that you can make with these instruments, and those are now sample sounds that you can use. So what we're going to do is show you how you can use these articulations in software. So now let's dive into how you can actually use these articulations. So if I were to load up a plugin of a violin, often they come with different articulations built in. In this case, I have some short sounds. For example, I have spiccato, staccato, I have legato sounds, and so on. So what I can do is, first of all, there's a few ways to do this. You could actually have a different instrument for each type of articulation. This is how you might have to do it if there's no other way, where you could load in a staccato sound, a legato sound, and so on. This is not very convenient. It's not very CPU efficient. So that's the worst case scenario. You can do that. There's another way. Sometimes the plugin comes with key switch abilities. So that's what you see down here. I have a certain key for a different articulation. And if I hit that key and I change the articulation, I'll get a different kind of sound. you'll see the sound is a lot shorter, and that's actually the articulation playing. So sometimes, for example, if using Kontakt, you can actually assign certain keys for key switching. So that's one way you can do that, and that's something that you can explore. Now there is a third way that some plugins have built in, which is the easiest way in my opinion. So what I have here is I have 3 different articulations loaded in. I have a staccato, I have 3 different kinds. And what I've done is I will have my first articulation routed to a certain MIDI out. In this case, I've sent it to MIDI out 1. My second articulation, I've routed to MIDI channel 5. And my third articulation, I've routed to MIDI channel 10. For this plugin, 3 articulations routed to different MIDI channels. You will notice that I have not routed any of them to Omni. If I route any to Omni, everything that is routed to Omni will always be affected together. This will sometimes cause you issues. If you want to change one thing, you change everything at once. So I recommend routing them to different MIDI out channels. Now that they're routed, what can I do with this? I can go into my instrument. I can then access the MIDI out channel. At least this is how you do it in FL Studio. If you're using your own digital audio workstation that's different, you might have to find a completely different way, or you may not be able to. I don't know. That's up to your DAW. But in FL Studio, I can select my MIDI out channel, and I can get a certain articulation. If I select my MIDI out channel 5 now, which I assigned, I'll get a different articulation. And I assigned another one to 10, so I can get my third articulation. And I can actually play them all within my same piano roll. So this is an extremely convenient way without having to swap channels, without having to swap instruments. I can do that all within my same instrument. Now this is not limited to just orchestral instruments. For example, if I have Omnisphere over here, I can actually assign an instrument to a different MIDI out channel. For example, my MIDI channel 1 has one instrument, my MIDI channel 2 has another instrument, my MIDI channel 3 has another instrument. So if I were to go into my piano roll, find my first instrument, now my second instrument, and my third instrument. So you can see how this is really useful for not only for orchestral instruments, but this tool can be applied for any kind of instrument that allows you to do MIDI routing. The other benefit of this is that it's a lot more convenient for your CPU. Rather than having 20 different articulations, you can just have one instrument, all the articulations combined. And if you're using something like that's really CPU intensive like Omnisphere, then this is another way to use less CPU. You can just have one instance of Omnisphere created with all of your different instruments loaded in, with only having to have one instance of Omnisphere though. So this is the overall idea of articulations. Is A, you can use different articulations for each channel, staccato, legato, and so on. B, you can use key switching, which is what this is. Or C, if your plugin allows you to do MIDI routing, you can load in your articulations within a single plugin. So this is how you can use articulations to create realistic sounding instruments.